Greetings, Grammar Pelusians. We are here with Sarah L. Kaufman, author of Verb Your Enthusiasm. We just talked about this book in the main segment, a fabulous book that I absolutely loved about verbs. But Sarah is also a Pulitzer Prize-winning dance critic. She wrote criticism for the Washington Post, and she wrote another book called The Art of Grace on Moving Well Through Life. And we're going to talk about how all these things sort of come together and share common themes. And then we're going to get her book recommendation. So Sarah L. Kaufman, thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you, Mignon. Delighted.
Yeah. So how do you get from being a dance critic to, I guess I can see writing about moving well through life and then writing about verbs?
Yeah, I guess I just have always been really a word nerd.
We like those
forever.
Here.
I know. It's great. My favorite people. I started out as a copy editor in my journalism career. So I was writing headlines. I was, fixing grammar, fixing syntax. So actual language has just always fascinated me. And in addition to, needing to know sort of dynamic and dramatic ways to write, because as a critic and covering, a kind of a niche art form like dance, which a lot of people love, but maybe don't understand very well, or, there may be some questions about, really, what does that mean? What did that mean when that happened? I wanted my writing to be very clear, but also to deliver some of the charge that I felt watching this art form. I felt like that was really a quality unique to my art form that I could share with people. And I certainly didn't want to come across as like a scholarly kind of critic, back in 1972, this phenomenon was first, I did not want to do that type of criticism. I really wanted to bring the art form to life and do justice to the dancers as a part of it, in addition to evaluation and taking a stand on the performance itself. So finding ways to do that and looking at other critics who I admired was how I developed an affinity for verbs.
Yeah, describing dance is such an active thing that people are doing. I feel like I'm at a loss for words here, but a dance, people they're constantly moving. It's about action. So,
Exactly.
That would be why you were focused on verbs, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's all action. It is. Even when there's non-action, it's for a reason. If someone stands still all of a sudden, or there's a scene where no one's moving, what is being conveyed? Writing about an art form, taking on the mantle of a critic, is a really great writing exercise that I advise everyone to try, whether you feel like you're an expert or an authority or not. Just do it, because it's really interesting. You can listen to jazz music or hip hop or anything you want to, or even watch sports. Watching a sporting event too, and just generate some verbs, generate some ways to express these unseeable things. Right? How someone gets from one point to another, how they get from one side of the stage to another, or, of course we see that, but really, how do you express it? How do you express it in just that burst of creativity that the dancer herself is embodying, right? And in music, how do you capture the swoops and the plunges in vocals, It's just so much. It's a wonderful exercise to take that on and play around with that. But yeah, that was the challenge for me in capturing dance, or in writing about, was really how do I capture it?
And that reminded me of something else that I thought was really good about the book is the exercises. I'm not always a fan of exercises in, trade books like this. They're not meant to be a textbook. Why are you giving me homework? Often they are somewhat uninspired. But in your book, I actually looked at the exercises and I thought, this actually would be a really useful and fun thing to try, like most of the time when I was going through the exercises. So kudos on that too.
I'm so glad. Yeah, they were fun to come up with, and some of them I have inflicted on my students as well. With positive results, I will say. I mean, I think one thing I advise is to do some of the writing work in advance, kind of in your downtime, that like coming up with movement-driven metaphors. Whenever something jumps to mind, about the sunlight, drifting down on the trees, like a silk scarf or something, anyone listening can come up with something more beautiful than that. But when these images come to you, jot them down, because then if you're writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, and you're struggling for a metaphor, it's easier if you've already got some a list that can kind of prompt you as suggestions.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting in the book how you talked about how uncommon metaphors light up the brain more than the ones we're used to hearing.
Yes, exactly. So if someone, if marketing materials say, right, our candidate kicked off his campaign, well, we're so used to seeing kicked off. That doesn't really excite us. It's just sort of part of the wallpaper, like a common phrase. But if you say something a little bit more uncommon, the sun, you're watching a sunrise and, you say that, the sun finally popped up like a piece of toast. It's a little bit more, a little bit more, like a little bit of a zing, like a little tingle, and maybe the reader will remember that. Maybe that'll be one of those phrases that they remember, that sticks with them.
Right. When you're talking about the cord running along the wall, what does that do in our brains?
Yeah, so that was a fascinating study by one of the cognitive scientists who I interviewed for this book, that in the field of embodied cognition, there are, in this field, which deals with intelligence, but also physical responses in terms of mental processes and brain processes. There are scientists who believe that we embody actions, that our brain takes us through actions when we read about them. And in very subtle ways. It's not like you're actually going to feel a punch in your gut when you read, that realization hit me like a punch in the gut. It's not like you're actually going to feel a punch, but in subtle ways, it triggers a little bit of a response, and that brings up emotion. So this woman has done studies where, like, the road meanders. Your brain understands that as a slow movement, and so your body reacts more. You read it more slowly, which is an interesting kind of nugget to take in as a writer. Is this a moment when I want to use a verb that will slow the action down, meander, or stumble, or wander? Or is it a moment when I want to speed things up and make the reader kind of, hustle a little bit to keep up, like, zigzag and, and hopscotch? Or in inanimate objects, even one like a cord, like a road meandering. Okay, that's an inanimate object, but we are used to, it is associated with movement, right? Cars travel on it. So a cord running along a wall, that's an inanimate object that has no connection to movement at all. But to say it runs along the wall just paints a more vivid picture in our mind and makes that image just stick in our mind a little bit more, and we read it as a faster, smoother process.
Mm-hmm. And when we are allowing adverbs into our writing, it's interesting when they are juxtaposed in ways that are also unfamiliar. Like one example that I remember is brutally sweating.
Yes, that comes from Zadie Smith's novel Swing Time. And of course, she's such a wonderful writer, and she uses language so well. And that was an example. A lot of us, it's very easy to overuse adverbs. They kind of come foremost to mind when we're speaking. They color the way we talk. They color our expressions. But the most powerful way to use an adverb is when, as you say, when you juxtapose an unusual adverb with an action, with a verb. So she talked about soldiers brutally sweating, sweating, just this ordinary physiological response, but brutally was just such a wonderful way to elicit the feeling of these soldiers standing in the hot sun, trapped inside their wool uniforms, and just the violence that does on their bodies and their spirits. In the same way that in Madame Bovary, there's an example where Gustave Flaubert writes about Emma Bovary brutally unlacing her corset, when she's with one of her many lovers. And that's another, like, you don't expect brutally with unlacing, but it just gets at kind of the violence, the quickness, the dynamics, the energy, that forceful energy going into the action.
Yeah. And this is why I'm so excited to get your book recommendations, because the examples in your book are fabulous. They're all from these brilliant passages from novels and stories. You must have had a hard time choosing just 3, but I'm very eager to get your book recommendations, Sarah.
Well, I am so happy to recommend these books. So as a big believer in arts journalism, as I am, I picked a book, a compilation of reviews by this is by a rock critic. It is actually called The First Collection of Criticism by a Living Female Rock Critic by Jessica Hopper.
Nice.
And I was asked recently to write about critics who had a great sense of style, who wrote with a lot of power and dynamics, and she was part of that, that list. Jessica Hopper has written for the Chicago Reader, for Pitchfork, for the Village Voice, and not only does she deliver cogent analysis of songs and music and artists themselves, but she just captures these ephemeral things, the way the voice sounds, the way it can just, run up and flutter and dive and plunge. And it's a very dynamic experience to read her work. Very exciting. Now I have 2 novels, and they kind of go on the other spectrum of verb use into the more subtle kind of interior charge that verbs can deliver. And the first one is called The Gathering by Anne Enright. She's an Irish novelist. And this book is about a large Irish family that gathers for the wake of a son. And it's told from the perspective of his closest sister. And she is mourning not only her brother, but also a lot of other fractures in her life that seem to stem from the same wounding incident that her brother, was traumatized by, and that both of them experienced when they were young. And so it's just incredibly poignant. It's also very witty. She's a beautiful writer. in one of the verb phrases that just jumps out at me is how she had just learned the news about her brother's death, and someone called her and was a little snippy on the phone when she talked about it and said, well, she couldn't really do this thing that he wanted her to do right away. Now she says, well, he was clearly disappointed because my brother had just died all over his Thursday. So, there's like this dark humor. And I love that phrase, this person just died all over all over his Thursday. But it's like a very raw and fresh way of writing. She's just an exquisite writer. And I marveled at how she delved into this subtle territory. And then the third book is just one of my absolute favorites. I don't have it to hand, but it is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. He actually began his creative life as a musician and a songwriter, to kind of circle back to Jessica Hopper. But this book is about a group of kids in a British boarding school, and it follows them into young adulthood. But the circumstances, there's this twist, and the circumstances are revealed very, very gradually. And it becomes, at least for me, it just delivered just almost unbearable feelings of like empathy and emotion, protectiveness, affection. It just flooded me with feelings, and that has never let me go. I mean, literally, this book has affected me from the last word until today. I think it's extraordinary, and not a surprise given the writer.
Yeah, and I listened to the audiobook of that book and enjoyed it very much as well. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for those recommendations. And, those are great gifts. You should read Sarah's book first, Verb Your Enthusiasm, and then dive into those others that she recommended. Sarah, where can people find you?
My website is sarahlkaufman.com. And I would love to hear from readers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.